When TSA security at Denver International ordered me to step out of line, my brother leaned in and whispered, "Just take the fall, Sophia. You're a veteran. They'll go easy on you." That was the moment I realized the heavy, locked steel case he'd secretly slipped into my military duffel wasn't just a favor. It was a setup to ruin my life. For years, I had covered for his reckless mistakes, but as federal agents began unzipping my bag, I made a sudden split-second decision that sent shockwaves straight through the terminal. Before the scanners picked it up, I swapped the package into the one place he never expected. The moment TSA yelled, "Stop!" my brother's face went ghost white as he realized the trap he'd built for me had just snapped shut on him. Follow my story to the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Sophia Reynolds. I'm 34 years old, and after 12 years of serving as an Army logistics captain, I thought I knew everything about risk, duty, and betrayal. But nothing in my military career prepared me for what my own family was willing to do to me. The morning air in the driveway was cold, carrying that quiet tension that always preceded a storm. I stood beside the trunk of my car, adjusting the heavy canvas straps of my military duffel. It was the same olive drab bag that had traveled with me through multiple deployments, scuffed and worn, but dependable. Much like the life I had tried to build for myself. My younger brother, Mark, pulled up to the curb in his sleek, overdue leased sedan. At 31, Mark possessed a charm that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. When we were kids, he broke windows and let me take the blame. When he got older, he defaulted on loans, and our parents pulled from their retirement to bail him out. But after I joined the military, I became his ultimate safety net. Whenever his reckless financial schemes collapsed, Mark expected me to use my authority, my savings, or my clean record to pull him out of the fire. "Let me get that for you, Sophia," Mark said, hopping out of the car before I could even grab the zipper. His voice had an unusual, hyperactive edge to it. He practically shoved my hands aside, hoisted the heavy duffel himself, and shoved it deep into the trunk. When I reached in to adjust the balance, he slammed the trunk lid down, missing my fingers by inches. "Relax, Captain," he laughed nervously, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the chill. "I'm just trying to help my favorite veteran." But his eyes were darting everywhere except at me. By the time we pulled into the dimly lit lower level of the airport parking garage, the silence between us felt suffocating. Mark kept drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Something was deeply wrong, and 12 years in logistics had taught me to trust my gut when a load felt off. While Mark stepped away to check his phone, pacing nervously near a concrete pillar, I walked to the back of the car and popped the trunk. I grabbed my military duffel and unzipped the main compartment to pull out my travel jacket. That's when my hand hit a hard, unyielding edge near the bottom. I pushed aside my folded service uniforms and pulled back the lining. Tucked deep inside was a heavy, matte black steel case, secured with a digital keypad and reinforced corner locks. It wasn't mine. "What is this, Mark?" I asked, my voice flat and icy as he spun around, his face instantly draining of color. "Sophia, close the bag, put it away," he snapped, rushing over and trying to zip the duffel shut. I shoved his hand back. "You hid a locked military-grade case in my duffel. Tell me what's in it right now." Mark took a shaky breath, stepping uncomfortably close. "It's just some sensitive business documents from my firm. Confidential stuff. If I put it in my bag, TSA will hassle me for hours. But you're a former Army officer. You've got clear security status. They won't even look twice at your gear." I stared at his trembling hands, the bead of sweat running down his neck, and the sheer desperation in his eyes. He wasn't just asking for a favor, he was using my service, my uniform, and my clean record as a human shield for something dangerous. We walked into the terminal, the overhead lights reflecting off the polished floors, but all I could focus on was the heavy weight pulling down on my shoulder. Mark walked a few paces ahead, constantly glancing back, his presence less like a brother and more like a handler watching a target. Beside him was his wife, Chloe, clutching a small designer backpack, completely oblivious to the silent storm brewing between us. As we joined the winding line for the main TSA checkpoint, the atmosphere grew suffocating. Security officers moved with practiced efficiency, their eyes scanning the crowd, while bomb-sniffing dogs paced between the stanchions. My pulse hammered against my ribs, each step forward bringing us closer to the X-ray scanners. Suddenly, Mark slowed his pace and leaned down, placing a cold hand on my arm. He pulled me slightly out of the flow of foot traffic. "Listen to me carefully, Sophia," he whispered, his voice dropping to a harsh, desperate tone. "If anything happens up there, if they flag that bag, you keep your mouth shut. You take the fall." I stared at him, stunned by the sheer nerve. "Are you insane? You're a veteran," Mark hissed, his eyes narrowing with a dark, ruthless edge I'd never seen before. "You have an honorable discharge and a clean record. They'll just give you a slap on the wrist. But if this lands on me, my life is over." He leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. "And don't even think about pointing fingers at me. That case is inside your military duffel. As far as the law is concerned, it's yours. I'll make sure everyone knows you brought it." Years of logistics operations in high-pressure environments had taught me one fundamental rule: when an enemy tries to box you in, you change the terrain. Mark thought he had me trapped using my own sense of duty and my clean record. He assumed I would freeze, accept the blow, and sacrifice myself to save him like I'd done my whole life. He forgot that I wasn't just his older sister anymore. I was a trained officer. As we shuffled closer to the metal detectors, a sudden surge of passengers bumped into our line near the baggage retagging station. It created a brief bottleneck, distracting the travelers around us. Mark was looking away, anxiously scanning the TSA officers ahead, completely focused on the checkpoint. I didn't hesitate. Using the crowd as visual cover, I unzipped the side pocket of my duffel with practiced, silent speed. My hands moved with fluid precision, sliding the heavy, matte black steel case out from beneath my uniform. In one swift, seamless motion, I leaned toward the luggage cart where Chloe had briefly set down Mark's overstuffed, custom carry-on bag, the very bag Mark had registered under his own boarding pass and ticket name. I slipped the locked case deep into the center compartment, zipped it tight, and smoothed the fabric back over. When the line surged forward again, I adjusted my duffel, now impossibly light on my shoulder. I walked toward the security lane empty-handed of his dangerous secret, watching Mark step into the line ahead of me with a smug, unearned confidence. He had no idea the counter-operation had already begun. Mark pushed his heavy carry-on bag onto the conveyor belt first, flashing a confident, practiced smile at the TSA officer stationed by the scanner. He stepped through the metal detector with his chin high, casting a quick, triumphant look back at me, waiting for the moment security would pull my duffel aside and ruin my life. Instead, my bag glided straight through the X-ray machine without a single hit. A sharp, high-pitched alarm suddenly echoed across the terminal. The conveyor belt ground to a halt. On the lead officer's high-resolution monitor, a solid, bright red outline flagged a dense metallic object inside the carry-on that had just passed through. "Stopping the belt! We have an unidentified heavy metallic payload on lane 4!" The operator shouted, signaling immediately to armed airport police stationed nearby. Mark's smug smile vanished instantly. His eyes widened in sheer horror as the officer reached into the scanner tunnel and pulled out his carry-on bag, placing it directly onto the heavy steel inspection table. "Sir, is this your bag?" the TSA supervisor asked, his voice ringing out sternly over the noisy crowd. Panicking, Mark gestured wildly toward me. "No, wait, that belongs to my sister. She's the veteran. She put that in my bag." The officer looked at Mark like he was insane, picked up the bright red baggage tag attached to the handle, and scanned the barcode. "Sir, this tag matches your boarding pass, your ID, and your ticket name. Do not move. Put your hands on the table right now." Two armed airport police officers stepped in immediately, flanking Mark as the TSA supervisor brought a pair of heavy bolt cutters over to the metal inspection table. The surrounding crowd went dead silent, travelers craning their necks to see what had brought a major international airport terminal to a grinding halt. "Sir, you have one chance to declare the contents of this locked container," the officer said, his hand resting firmly on his holstered sidearm. I don't know what's in there. I swear," Mark stammered, his face pale and drenched in cold sweat as he looked helplessly at me, silently begging me to step in and take the blame. I just stood there, my hands clasped calmly in front of me, watching the trap he built snap closed around him. With a loud, metallic snap, the lock yielded. The supervisor pried the heavy steel lid open. Inside lay thick stacks of bound corporate bearer bonds, encrypted flash drives, and dozens of falsified offshore bank documents totaling millions of dollars, evidence of a massive, systematic corporate embezzlement scheme Mark had been running for years. Tucked right along the side was a forged passport bearing his picture under an alias. He hadn't just been trying to sneak contraband through security. He was preparing to flee the country and throw me to the federal authorities as his ultimate decoy. "Step back! Keep your hands where we can see them!" the officer barked, forcing Mark's arms behind his back as the steel handcuffs clicked tightly around his wrists. Mark thrusted his head back, screaming in total hysterics as they pushed him toward the security room. "Sophia, tell them you did this." But no one was listening to him anymore. The security room was quiet, a sharp contrast to the chaotic scene at the checkpoint. Federal investigators reviewed the airport terminal footage, which clearly showed Mark furtively hiding the locked case in my military duffel back at the parking garage, followed by my silent countermove in the terminal. The evidence was undeniable. My military record remained pristine, and by afternoon, I walked out of the airport completely exonerated. Mark wasn't so fortunate, facing federal charges of corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and identity theft. His bail was denied due to the fake passport and flight risk. The corporate empire he had built on lies collapsed overnight, and he now faces up to 20 years in federal prison. For 12 years, I served my country with honor, believing that loyalty to family was absolute. But real honor means knowing when to stop letting toxic people drag you into their darkness. Outmaneuvering my brother wasn't just about saving myself from a prison sentence. It was about finally breaking the cycle of manipulation that had defined my life for far too long. Standing up to family when they try to use you isn't easy, but sometimes it is the only way to reclaim your freedom, your integrity, and your life. What would you have done if you found yourself in my shoes at that security checkpoint? Would you have taken the fall for family or handed them over to the law? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to mention what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Thank you for watching.